Remember when NBA games used to get wild? I'm talking about players losing their cool, benches clearing, and all hell breaking loose. Those games were pure adrenaline. Look, I know fighting in most sports is frowned upon and usually results in suspensions and large fines. But let's be honest for a second. It is exciting. In basketball especially, fighting makes the game more exciting because it rarely happens. So, which NBA brawl takes the crown as the most shocking of all time? Let's find out. First up, we got the infamous Knicks-Nuggets brawl. This one's a doozy. The highlight? Carmelo Anthony landed one of the most solid punches in NBA fight history, then pulled a Usain Bolt and sprinted away. Ironically, just 5 years after playing a starring role in this brawl against the Knicks, Melo ended up wearing the blue and orange himself. Talk about a plot twist. But here's the kicker. Melo's punch was so legendary, it earned him a whopping 15-game suspension. David Stern, the NBA commissioner at the time, did not mess around. Now, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more content that'll have you saying, did that really just happen? Trust me, we're just getting started. Let's rewind a bit to a classic confrontation between two of the game's greatest trash talkers, Larry Bird and Julius Erving. During the game, Bird was on fire, dropping buckets left and right. He had already racked up 42 points, and he was making sure Dr. J knew all about it. Now, Irving's no slouch, but he's only managed 6 points at this point. Can you feel the frustration building? Well, it all came to a head when Bird's trash talk finally pushed Dr. J over the edge. In a move that would make WWE wrestlers proud, two of Irving's teammates held Bird down while the good doctor finished the work. Talk about teamwork, right? I guess when you can't beat him on the scoreboard, you might as well try and just beat him. Remember the name Bill Laimbeer? If you were an NBA fan in the 80s, chances are you wanted to punch this guy. Well, Robert Parrish of the Boston Celtics actually did it. During a rebound battle, Parrish decided he'd had enough of Laimbeer's antics and landed a few solid punches. The best part? Not even a foul was called. The refs were probably thinking, you know what? We'll let this one slide. Speaking of Laimbeer, he seems to have been a favorite punching bag for the Celtics. Even the legendary Larry Bird couldn't resist taking a swing at him. In fact, Bird hated Laimbeer so much that he refused to shake his hand before games. Now that's what I call a dedication to your grudges. Alright, let's fast forward to a more recent era. Remember when Kobe Bryant was the new hot shot in the league? Well, Chris Childs sure didn't care about Kobe's rising star status. During one heated game, Kobe thought he could intimidate Childs with some trash talk and a half-hearted elbow. Big mistake. Childs took the fight right to Kobe, landing at least one solid punch. I bet Kobe learned a valuable lesson that day. Don't bring elbows to a fist fight. Now, if you're loving these NBA fight stories, make sure to smash that subscribe button. We've got plenty more where this is coming from, and trust me, you don't want to miss out on the next video. Let's switch gears to a fight that's more comical than brutal. Think about it. Shaquille O'Neal, all 7'1" and 325 pounds of him, decides he's had enough of Brad Miller. Without much provocation, Shaq goes after Miller, swinging his massive arms. The funny part? Shaq doesn't connect with a single punch. Miller must have been thanking his lucky stars, because if Shaq had landed even one of those haymakers, Miller wouldn't be jumping around shirtless after the fight. He'd be seeing stars. Now let's talk about a fight that's become the stuff of legends, the punch. This one's no laughing matter. During a game in 1977, Kermit Washington of the Lakers threw a punch at Rudy Tomjanovich of the Rockets that was so devastating it nearly ended Tomjanovich's life. The impact fractured Tomjanovich's skull and required serious surgery. It's a sobering reminder of how dangerous these on-court altercations can be. But let's end the story with a positive note. Tomjanovich, showing the heart of a true champion, fully recovered from the incident. He went on to have an impressive coaching career with the Rockets, leading them to 2 championships. Now, if you're thinking, surely these fights don't happen in important games, boy, do I have a story for you. Let's talk about the only fight to ever occur in the NBA Finals. It was in 1986. The mighty Boston Celtics were facing off against the Houston Rockets. Ralph Sampson of the Rockets, realizing his team had no chance against the greatest team in NBA history, yes, I said it, decided to take matters into his own hands. Sampson went after Jerry Sitching, a much smaller player. But here's where it gets good. Bill Walton, the Celtics center, stepped in and took Sampson down like a pro wrestler. It was David versus Goliath, except this time Goliath got body slammed. In the end, it didn't matter who won the fight because a few days later, the Celtics won their 16th championship, and the Rockets went home empty-handed. And speaking of David vs. Goliath matchups, let's talk about the time Shawn Bradley got body slammed. Now, Bradley was a giant even by NBA standards, standing at a whopping 7 feet 6 inches. But height doesn't always equal might, as Mark Davis proved. Despite being a whole foot shorter, Davis didn't back down when Bradley tried to intimidate him. Instead, he channeled his inner Rocky Balboa, picked Bradley up, and slammed him to the ground. It was like watching Rocky IV, except instead of the Soviet Union, it was just a really tall guy getting taken down a peg. Now, let's shift gears to a fight that had more star power than an actual all-star game. Think about it. Michael Jordan, the GOAT himself, going toe-to-toe with Reggie Miller. Now, Miller was known for his sharpshooting and even sharper tongue, but taking on MJ? That's a whole different ballgame. The fight broke out, and Miller probably thought he was making a statement. But here's the thing about making Michael Jordan angry. It never ends well for you. After the scuffle, Jordan went on to score 40 points, grab 9 rebounds, dish out 8 assists, and snag 6 steals. It's like Miller poked a sleeping bear, and that bear turned out to be the most dominant force in basketball history. But Reggie Miller wasn't done making enemies among NBA royalty. A few years later, he got into it with Kobe Bryant. The Black Mamba had just hit an unnecessary three-pointer, and Miller took exception to it. Was the three needed? Absolutely not. Did Reggie need to fight him over it? Probably not. But hey, this is the same Pacers team that later fought fans. So I guess fighting Kobe was just a warm-up. Now, let's talk about a fight that had more twists and turns in it than a soap opera. The infamous Malice at the Palace. This wasn't just a fight, it was an all-out brawl that spilled into the stands and became one of the biggest sports stories of the decade. It all went down in 2004 between the Indiana Pacers and the Detroit Pistons. The teams were fresh off of heated playoff series and tensions were high. On one side, you had the Pacers with Ron Artest, now known as Meta Sandiford Artest, Steven Jackson, and Jermaine O'Neal. On the other, the Pistons with Rasheed Wallace and Ben Wallace. Mix in a rowdy Detroit crowd and you've got the recipe for a disaster. The spark that lit the powder keg? A fan threw a drink at Artest while he was lying on the scorer's table. Artest charged into the stands and all hell broke loose. Players were fighting fans were fighting players, and the whole thing looked more like a Royal Rumble than a basketball game. The fallout was massive. Suspensions were handed out left and right, with Artest receiving a season-long ban. It was a black eye for the NBA and led to increased security measures and stricter rules about player-fan interactions. It's safe to say that we'll probably never see anything quite like it again in the NBA, and that's probably for the best. But let's lighten the mood a little bit and talk about a fight that ended in the most unexpected way possible. Remember when Shaquille O'Neal and Charles Barkley got into it on the court? Two of the biggest, literally and figuratively, personalities in NBA history going at it? You'd think this would end with some heavy fines and suspensions, right? Wrong. These two legends settled their differences in the most gentlemanly way possible, with a game of golf. Yeah, you heard that right. Golf. And not just any golf game, but a televised match where the loser had to wear a Speedo to the beach. Unsurprisingly, Shaq came out on top in both the fight and the golf match. Poor Chuck just couldn't catch a break. But hey, at least we got to see these two giants swinging golf clubs instead of throwing punches. And let's be honest, the mental image of either of them in a Speedo is probably way more devastating than any punch anyone could ever throw. But now let's talk about a fight that had more sequels than the Fast and Furious franchise. The ongoing feud between the New York Knicks and the Chicago Bulls. These two teams had more beef than a Texas barbecue, and it all came to a head during a playoff game. The brawl started on the court but quickly spilled into the stands. And who so happened to be sitting in the front row watching this mayhem unfold? None other than NBA Commissioner David Stern himself. Talk about having a front row seat to your own nightmare. The aftermath? JoJo English got a 1-game suspension, Derek Harper got 2 games, and David Stern got a priceless expression on his face that looked like he was watching his league implode in real time. I just imagine Stern was thinking, I don't get paid enough for this, as he watched grown men in shorts rolling around in the stands. How about this one? Remember the Phoenix Suns New York Knicks brawl in 1993? This one had an interesting twist. Two of the main instigators were Danny Ainge and Doc Rivers. Yes, the same Danny Ainge and Doc Rivers who would later become respected coaches and executives. I guess they were just working out some youthful aggression before settling into their leadership roles. Now, let's rewind to the 1984 NBA Finals for a moment that changed the course of basketball history. Think about it. Kurt Rambis is racing down the court on a fast break, probably dreaming about an easy layup. Suddenly, out of nowhere, Kevin McHale clotheslines him like he's auditioning for the WWE. In today's NBA, that kind of a move would get you suspended really fast. But back in the 80s, just another day at the office. McHale did get called for a foul, but that was it. No ejection, no suspension, no stern talking to from the principal's office. But here's the kicker. That play, as cheap as it was, turned the tide of the 1984 finals in favor of the Celtics. It fired up the team, intimidated the Lakers, and helped Boston secure yet another championship. So the next time someone tells you violence never solves anything, just show them this clip. Little disclaimer, please don't actually solve your problems by throwing elbows. We're professionals here, remember. Now let's wrap things up with a fight that's more famous for what happened on the sidelines than on the court. The New York Knicks and Miami Heat are going at it. Punches are being thrown, players are shoving, it's your typical NBA dust-up. But then the camera pans to the sideline, and what do we see? Knicks coach Jeff Van Gundy, all 5'9" of him, has latched onto Alonzo Mourning's leg like a koala on a eucalyptus tree. Van Gundy, bless his heart, was trying to break up the fight, but instead, he ended up being dragged around the court, holding on for dear life as giants battled above him. It was like watching a chihuahua trying to separate two Great Danes. Ineffective? Definitely. Hilarious? Absolutely. But here's the best part. This wasn't even Van Gundy's first rodeo. He had a habit of getting in the middle of these scraps, despite being roughly the size of most players' left leg. It's like he just never learned a lesson. Or maybe he just really enjoyed the view from down there. Either way, it gave us some of the most memorable images in NBA fight history. And that's a wrap. If you enjoyed this video, you know what to do. Smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring that notification bell. We've got more great content coming your way, from top 10 lists to deep dives into NBA history. So thanks for watching NBA Swish.